which is a project of Casa de Esperanza. And welcome to this small gathering webinar. Some of you might know this webinar was by invitation only, so we didn't open it to the general public, with the idea that we would have the opportunity to have a little bit of a conversation with all of you. So I don't think there's anything wrong to have a smaller group, as Peter was saying, lots of room to learn more with a smaller group. So welcome. And as you all know, this came about from a request for technical assistance that we put out, where we chose 10 organizations, and unfortunately we weren't able to choose everybody in the lot. We had more than 50 applications, and based in different criteria, including preparedness and previous work on engaging men and so on. We did choose 10 organizations that we're working more directly with, but we wanted to also use this opportunity, since there's so much interest in the topic, to give a kind of a light technical assistance to whoever wanted to join for this webinar. So again, my hope is that we do have a deck of PowerPoints prepared to go through the toolkit and the campaign and so on. But my hope is that we can do this more interactively, and that we can have a dialogue and a question and answer and so on. So Sarah, now before I introduce the other presenters, will address technical issues.
Hi, my name is Sarah Fleming. I'm the Administrative and Logistics Specialist for the National Latino Network, so I'm running the webinar from behind the scenes. So just a few notes about technical issues. If you're having any trouble hearing, so you can either listen through the phone or you can listen through your computer. It looks like a lot of people are listening through your computer. If you are having any trouble hearing, you can call in on the phone. The number is 1-866-628-8620, and the passcode is 494932. I'll also put that in the chat window. The other thing is the chat window is another place where you can ask questions and interact. It is at the bottom left side of your screen. We've had some people introducing themselves already. So if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat window or send me a private message in that same box. And so since this is a smaller group, we're allowing people to unmute themselves. You're all muted, all the participants, but you can unmute yourself by pressing *6, and I'll unmute you and you can ask questions. So that is it. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah is the webinar queen here at the Casa de Esperanza. She is a master at this and makes it work very smoothly. So thank you so much. So I'll have my co-presenters introduce themselves. Pierre, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Juan Carlos, this is Pierre. Were you passing the phone on to me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Pierre Berastain, and I am the Communications and Marketing Coordinator here at Casa de Esperanza National Latino Network. You've probably been receiving some of my emails, and welcome to the webinar. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Pierre. And Pierre has a wealth of knowledge and communication, media, and social media, and so on. And he will talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have to help you to be a little more media savvy about all of these issues. Thank you, Pierre. And Robert, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Juan Carlos. My name is Robert De Leon. I'm currently here in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, and I work with Casa Esperanza as a consultant, helping organizations like yours localizing the Invito Toolkit we plan to discuss today. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Robert. And actually, Robert has also a wealth of experience on the topic of engaging men and has been working very directly with men in Texas, with immigrant men there, immigrant workers, and so he will be able to answer some of your questions about engaging men. Thank you all. So let me start with a little introduction, and then maybe I will open up before we start into the content of the toolkit that some of you already know, I'm sure, but I'll open it maybe to some general questions or where people are with the topic and so on. So very quickly, since we are part of this organization, Casa Esperanza, I want to share, and sometimes there's some confusion about what is Casa Esperanza and what is the National Latino Network. Well, Casa Esperanza is our mother organization. The National Latino Network is a project of Casa Esperanza, is the national arm of Casa Esperanza. But Casa Esperanza is a local organization in St. Paul, Minnesota, that has been around for more than 30 years, and basically started by a group of pioneer Latinas that, as in many other parts of the country, and I'm sure some of you will relate to this, so that the mainstream services were not serving their community the way that they should, and decided to start their own shelter and community services and so on. And the shelter is still there, but the bulk of the work is on community engagement and on meeting members of the community where they are throughout the Twin Cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis. You can see that our mission is to mobilize Latino and Latina communities to end domestic violence. So we don't see ourselves as ending domestic violence ourselves as an organization, but we see ourselves as a catalyst to help the community and the wisdom of the community to end the violence. And part of what our theoretical framework is that we emphasize the concept of social capital, which can include, as it says there, trust, reciprocity, information cooperation, because we believe that's the key element to decrease domestic violence. Part of our work is to help develop that social capital in the community. And in terms of the National Latino and Latina Network for Healthy Families and Communities, we are the FIPSA, which is the HHS-funded culturally specific national resource center serving Latino and Latina communities. And the main elements of our work are training and technical assistance, what we're doing right now, sometimes through webinars, sometimes through conferences, sometimes in-person training and technical assistance. But we also do public policy. We have an office in Washington, D.C., and we work to make sure that federal legislation and procedures and policies are inclusive of the needs of our communities and our survivors. And we also do research. We have a center at Georgia State University directed by Dr. Julia Perilla, which does original research on Latinas and Latinas in the U.S., which there is not a lot of at this point. And all of this, of course, you can access through our website, nationallatino.network.org. We have products, and of course, the Invito is one of our products, but we have many other products on our website, and we are actually about to unveil soon, and there's Pierre just prepared our website, and he's our web guru, so everything you see there has gone through his excellent work. And in terms of products, we are very close to unveiling 2 new toolkits. One will be about working with limited English proficiency survivors of domestic violence, but it can be certainly expanded. And the other will be on how organizations can join the wave of evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence and so on, which are two hot topics, as you know. And we organize events. That picture you see there is from our conference in Austin a few years ago. We have national conferences every couple of years, and we also do regional meetings with different topics and so on. we are very active on social media, and I'll pass it to Pierre so that he can tell you a little bit about it.
Sure. Thanks, Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos mentioned we are very active on social media because, as many of you know, many of our communities are taking onto social media to express their views, to get resources, to share information. So we see social media as a really important nexus between our communities and us. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We have a Pinterest and a Google+. To say that social media is really important for us is an understatement. For sometimes it has been critical for survivors who have reached out for help over social media, over Facebook messages, or for organizations that have been looking for resources from outside the United States or even within the United States and reach out through Twitter. We have fostered partnerships through social media. So all of that to say that part of my role in being in this webinar is to let you know that I am available to give some assistance or tools, tricks, if you will, on how to use social media and also measure the impact that you are having with your social media initiatives. As part of the Invito campaign itself, we created a media kit that is not only on social media, but it's also on traditional media. It includes op-eds for newspapers or online editorials, how to contact radio stations and TV stations, and I'm going to put a link right here. You can access this media toolkit by going through the teinvito.org website under Herramientas or Tools and Materials in English, and then Campaña Te Invito or Te Invito Campaign. And it's the very bottom of or right before the videos, I should say, it says this media kit. So it's a media kit that you can access, and again, once again, it has a number of resources that you can use for your organizations. So that'll be all for now. Thanks, Juan Carlos.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And Pierre, I think, put the link there, right, for the media kit in English. And it's a really good resource. I encourage everybody to see it and use it and so on. And Robert is the person that has been managing the media, the social media specifically for the Te Invito campaign. And Robert, I know that you're trying to get to 10,000 likes on Facebook, I think. So maybe you can make a pitch about it.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, we're definitely trying to expose the social media platforms that we're currently utilizing. That is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Te Invito happens to have a profile for each of these social media platforms. It's missing there for Instagram, but I mean, it's the same as the ones that you see for Twitter and Facebook. So just use the same username to find us on those social media outlets. I think one of the most important things to recognize is that, yes, there are a lot of individuals using social media, and this is one great way of engaging men in your work. I know that for myself here in South Texas, when I originally started using the Te Invito Toolkit, it was a great way for me to start a conversation with men and boys in my immediate area. So now being able to utilize or to use this toolkit to engage other organizations and helping them creating or helping them in creating a way or a means to engage men and boys in your community, the Te Invito Toolkit provides you with the PSA print material that you can localize for your needs to specifically create print material to engage your community, specifically men and boys. And again, being able to use that material where you don't have to create something from scratch, we have it for you and you can use it on your social media. If you have any, which I'm assuming that you do, you can use it on your Facebook account, your Twitter account, or even on Instagram. And that's just a way to promote the engagement of men and boys in your community.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. And there's a little bit of an echo when you're speaking. I don't know if you're in speakerphone, but if you are, you might want to switch.
I thought I did. I'm sorry. Is this much better?
Yeah, much better. Excellent.
Great. Yeah.
And I think one of the beauties of having Robert involved in this effort is that he was first a recipient of TA from us. So now he's reproducing what he did. He runs a great organization down there in South Texas called Bro Models, and he was a pioneer in using the PSAs and those resources very, very effectively. He brings personal experience with that. There it is, bromodels.org. So at this point, maybe I'd like to open it to some general questions. Again, to unmute yourself, you would have to press *6, and I believe to mute yourself again, you have to do *6 again. So I'd like to hear from folks. What are some of the things that interest you about this topic? How can we best serve you in this webinar, especially since we have a smaller group? *6 to unmute yourself. Or you can use the chat function to ask questions. And it's totally okay if there are no questions right now. That's fine. We can move on and start sharing some of the information with you. So before getting in the toolkit itself, I want to talk a little bit about how all of this initiative came about, because this is a very important part of how we do the work at Casa, and one of the things that I'm most proud of, which and this came about from again, some of our founding mothers and guiding mothers, that the work that we do is always coming from the bottom up and from up to the bottom. That there's a feedback loop there, but that whenever we have a new idea, a new initiative, something that we want to implement, we go to the community and we ask questions rather than assuming that this is something that they want. And also on a regular basis, we do listening sessions, which is kind of like focus groups, but a little more relaxed in some ways, more of a dialogue. Every 5 years or so, we go back to the community and do general listening sessions to make sure that what we're offering is still what people want. There's in our website, in the National Latino Network website, there's a resource called Fuerza Unida, which is a manual, basically, that describes not only the trajectory that Casa went through the years to serve better the Latino community, but also how to replicate that process. And like with everything else, with Invito, we knew for a long time that we wanted to create a resource for working with men on primary prevention, by the way. Like it specifies that Invito is by and large a primary prevention tool to involve Latino men in the work. And if not, we do speak a little bit about intervention, because I think sometimes the line between intervention and prevention can be a little blurred. But the main focus here is engaging men who are not violent to end violence against women. So we went to the community in St. Paul and also in Atlanta, where our sister organization, Caminar Latino, is located. And basically, we went and asked folks about, how can we solve this problem? How can we involve men? What are some of the things that are important? And we did listening sessions both with men and with women. So you can see there's some of the topics that came up with men where it is a social problem, so an awareness that this is not an individual or a family problem, only, but it's something that it's a social problem. That machismo, and I would maybe reframe that as traditional gender roles play a big part of this. And the reason that I'm reframing it is that I have a complicated relationship with the word macho or machismo, which it's a word that some of you know or all of you know. It's in Spanish, and basically to describe the ideology of male superiority over women, basically, right? And I think it's a good word because it means people understand what it means. I sometimes have a hard time talking when people who are not Latinos or Spanish speaking use it in the context of non-Latinos. Part of me is like, well, you have to come up with your own word. Don't use our word. And it's just half kidding. I think the main problem is that I think sometimes there's a perception that because we have a word for this ideology of supremacy, that we practice that more than other cultures, and I don't believe that to be the case. I think it might manifest in different ways in different cultures, but unfortunately that ideology of supremacy and superiority is in every culture in some way or not, as well as also forces that are against that ideology. That's also very important to mention. Every culture has forces that support that ideology and forces that oppose that ideology. The issue of education came up, and again, not surprising. That tends to happen a lot. And formal education, so education in school, but also peer education as well as family education. A topic that came up that it's an interesting one, and I have to say that I believe, not 100%, but it seems that almost all, if not all, of our audience are women today, which is still not surprising in these days, right? When we talk about men and masculinities and gender, it's like mainly women paying attention, unfortunately. And that's started to change for sure. But one of the things that came up, and I think it's something very significant, is that men don't have spaces where we can talk about these issues among ourselves, so that's the lack of support, that women naturally talk to each other about these issues, but men don't. We are socialized not to talk about it. We are socialized to talk about sports and cars and real and imagined conflicts, romantic conflicts. But in terms of like talking about real things, we are not socialized to do that, and there are very few spaces, if any, for men to go and talk about this issue. So that came very, very strongly, and I think something to pay attention to. And also the issue that it's important to do activities that involve the whole family. Those are some of the things that men said. I have a question here. Will we get access to the PowerPoint? Sure, absolutely. Absolutely, we can send a copy of the PowerPoint. No problem. Sarah will do that. In terms of what the women said, is it'll be in the archive, that men need help, need support. So this is something that we hear a lot from communities that are marginalized, that we cannot just unfortunately, that the mainstream model of using the criminal justice system to solve this problem, it's just not enough. It's not adequate. It's necessary, and it's great that it's there. But we need more than that. We need to support the men to change, The concept that violence also hurts men. And I think that refers both at the fact that if we talk about violence in general, not only about gender-based or violence against women, men are the majority of victims of violence, not from women, from other men, right? From community violence, not to mention things like war, of course. But also, I think the concept that down at the end of the line, if you will, men who use violence also destroy themselves. They destroy everything in life. They destroy their families. They destroy their children, their partners, and so on. But finally, they also destroy themselves down the line. One of the lines that I've been using recently, I was just doing a series of workshops in Bolivia, actually, talking a lot to young people there, and I truly believe this: men who embrace the ideology of machismo, of superiority, that are abusive, that are controlling, are not happy men. Happiness and machismo just are contradictory to each other. So men who seek respect and love and equality in their relationships have a much better chance of having happy relationships, right? No, there's no guarantee, but they have a better chance. The issue of women have to engage men at home, I think that has to do with women kind of like opening spaces for men to do our part in the home front. That's some feminists, including Lori Steinem, have been saying, empowering women and opening public spaces for women to develop is just only half of the equation of women's of gender equality. Men also have to take the role in the home, and I'm very very intentional about not saying helping at home, but just taking our full role as doing working at home and raising children, like that photograph that we have there. That we continue to be role models, certainly for our children, and then this idea of inviting men. That's where this started coming from the focus group idea of, rather than indicting men or pointing the finger, saying to men, you're invited to be in space with us. And in some of the commonalities that this has, again, both set of the concept of inviting, where the idea of the Invito came from. I invite you, the idea of including the whole family in activities and so on. The idea, as I said before, that we still are role models, it came across that as we have to take the lead, maybe that has to do with male privilege, knowing that we have this privilege that we cannot necessarily renounce to, and how do we use that privilege in some way to destroy the privilege itself. And then this issue that we men need our own spaces to talk about some of these issues. So those were the focus groups. We analyzed them. We kind of went into what are the key messages, and then we came back with inviting men, Invito. We went back to the same people in the focus groups, and we tested the message, and it tested very positively. So that's how the idea of inviting men came about. So the key message there it is, inviting men. Are there any questions at this point, or anything from Robert or Pierre that you would like to ask? Okay. So at any point, you can certainly ask questions. There's even a function that you have there called in my status next to the phone number that you can raise your hand if you have a question, and then we can open the line at any point. So what is the Invito? The Invito is both a campaign that can be implemented anywhere, and we're trying to implement it in as many communities as possible and localize it in as many communities as possible. And it's also a toolkit that it's alive and keeps on growing and changing with different components, including a rationale of why it's important to engage men, cultural considerations on how to work with Latino men, how is it different from mainstream men, tools, the specific tools that people can use and can use, especially in the context of institutions, and also a section on what individual men can do, because some of the people that come to us are not in institutions. So what individual men can do. And there's a section about sharing your work. So those are the main sections, and we are going to cover some of them right now. What you see here are posters. I think this actually the first one is a card, one of those palm cards that can be developed, and this is the poster. So in terms of the materials for the campaign, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I like to talk about it right now. The PSAs, which are both TV and radio, as well as these posters, can be localized. So a good example is in that poster that you see in the green part there in the middle. Yes, actually that one. Thank you. It says Casa Esperanza, but it could say your organization. You could change that into your organization and put your phone number there instead and print it that way. Likewise, in the videos, which we're not going to show right now, that you can see on the website, you can localize that and put your phone number at the end. And Robert, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that works from the technical standpoint.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. So I mean, with the Invito PSAs, or even customizing the print material that we've just shown you here, it's just a matter of downloading the PDF files and customizing it to where you edit and add your information. Now, I did provide my email address, so if anyone has any trouble in making that edit to the file, or if you have trouble saving it and or printing it, we can, I can obviously walk you through it or provide you with instructions to help you finalize a product, to customize it specific to your organization. I also want to mention that these materials are a great way for you to either start the engaging men work in your community if you're not doing so already. But if you're doing it already, this material, either it be the PSA for TV or radio or the print material, can truly help you enhance your engagement of men in your community.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. And we also, even though we cannot localize necessarily the TV PSAs for you, we could put you in touch with the person that we use to localize it, which is a local person in St. Paul, and I think for a nominal cost, and I don't think you know how much she charges, right, Maria, for doing that. I think it's like $100, $200. You could have the PSAs localized with your own number there. Now, Sonia has a very interesting question here. Using the words of breaking the chain of violence, and I think she's referring to this, when inviting men does not cause them to think that they are stigmatizing the issue, would we want to emphasize to say, te invito a fomentar relaciones positivas? I am afraid that mentioning violence may cause them to be put off. Your thoughts? Very good question. Thank you, Sonia. And again, I mean, I do have an answer for this, but I'm going to put it out to Robert and maybe Pierre, your thoughts about that. And I do want to say something about the PSAs and the posters, that we did not come up with the messages, but we brought, again, men in the community, and we did a couple of community meetings, actually, and we asked men to come up with their own messages about how would they complete the sentence te invito. So what you see there are actually the words of the men that we work with. That doesn't mean that they are universal, of course, but they're a spontaneous expression. So I don't know. What is your opinion, Robert, about that?
I think that And thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's important to recognize that men were a part of the focus group when this toolkit was developed. We definitely are hearing from men in our respective communities about how they feel, about how they can help in becoming a part of the solution when it comes to ending violence in their community. And I say violence because, violence comes in all different forms, right? Although we aim to end and help end domestic violence, a lot of the men, especially in my experience, I know that a lot of men want to become involved, and maybe we're just not vocal about it because we don't know where to go, or maybe there's not a group or program.
Hello? Robert?
Yes.
I lost you there a little bit, or did you stop talking?
No. What was the last thing that you heard? I'm sorry.
That maybe there's not a group to go to.
Right. So there may not be a group or a program to work with engaging men around domestic violence prevention. I do feel that a lot of men welcome, or at least in the work that I've done here, have welcomed the invitation by using this print material, and it definitely is a great way to start the conversation. And I don't think some men have become defensive, but the only situation that I've come across in someone becoming defensive about us approaching them to join our group is they'll say something like, well, I'm not a violent individual, so, why should I be a part of the group? And that's where we can engage them and say, well, this is you're the kind of guy we're looking for to join us in our efforts. Men that are not violent, that can help us promote the type of work that we're doing in our community.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Pierre, do you have something to say from the communications point of view? There's always a discussion of what's the balance between keeping a campaign positive and not sugarcoating it, right?
Right. Well, I'll just repeat what you said, that this came out of from the ground and, listening to community, and those are the messages that we put out there. But then, Sonia, you're also part of the community, and so when you say, hey, we would like to have a poster that says, Te invito a fomentar relaciones positivas, we invite you to promote healthy relationships, I'm thinking, part of the campaign is to continue listening to community and the needs of community. And if you go to teinvito.org, we have a link there that says share your work. And you can actually, one, share the work that you're doing with men, and two, also give feedback on the Te Invito campaign itself. And the goal of that part, which is, I think, underutilized by some organizations, is the goal of that section of the website is precisely to do what Sonia has invited us to do, to create other messages and to be able to have more material made available. And I'll say this, that the changing or adding a message to one of those posters for us, from the design point of view, is very, very quick. From the communications part, we have the raw files, and so we just have to change it. So if you want a poster that said, Te invito a fomentar relaciones positivas, I think we can work on making that available. And so it's about creating a number of messages that resonate with a variety of point of views that we have in our community. And some people, as Robert mentioned, really resonate with these posters. And Sonia, as you mentioned, some other people might resonate with the other kind of messaging that you are proposing. And I think it's a wonderful proposal.
Yeah, thank you. And I see that Robert already put the link, and there is, this is the the main page of the Toolkit, and you can see here on the right that this is the Share Your Work section. And one of the things that I always emphasize is that there's not only one way to approach this, and that the message that will engage one person might turn someone off, and vice versa. So one thing, going back to that idea of the change, and you can see these other messages there, it's a change for the future. That's obviously a very positive one. But sometimes I have found that with some men, this idea that of breaking the cycle, especially men who grew up in abusive households themselves, and maybe young men that are still like having to grapple with that legacy, if you will, what they're going to do with it. Sometimes it's this idea that they can break that cycle of violence that might have been happening for generations. It's a very, very powerful idea, very powerful. Again, it's not universal for all men, but for some men it can work very well. So thank you for the question and the comment, Sonia. Any other questions at this point? Either you can type them on the chat or you can do star 6 if you want to ask more questions. Okay, so we'll move on. So you can see the first page there, the landing page of the English version. I think if you go to invito.org, you land on Spanish, right? And then on this section here it says English, Spanish. You can change it if you wish. And so we'll go quickly through some of the sections here. As I said, the why, which is the rationale, the how, which has to do with cultural considerations, the part with the actual tools and materials, which includes the campaign and other things too. It's not only about our work, by the way. We are also featuring other people's work. And what to do is more of a part of what individual men can do. So let's go to the first section, which is why. The rationale, and we're bringing some of the research that we have here, including the prevalence of domestic violence. And again, we're not going to go in detail. You can visit the toolkit yourself and do this on your own. But I will give an overview, and again, take questions if necessary, or if people want to ask questions. The factors that intersect with the occurrence of domestic violence, so for instance, knowledge and attitudes about domestic violence in the Latino community, the issue of the cycle, again, we just talked about the intergenerational transmission of violence, the comorbid problem of drug and alcohol use, financial factors, and cultural factors and gender norms. As I said, there's not an enormous amount of research that is available, especially about working with Latino men in particular. So we're putting most of what we know out there. And again, this is another section where people know about, well, there's this other study, and it's an important one. We would love to hear more about it. We actually are in the middle right now of completing a very exciting survey that will be part of another campaign, and not only for engaging men, but will be part of the No More campaign. Will be the Spanish version of the No More campaign called No Más, and that will there will be a wealth of data that's coming out from that, because we, in partnership with other folks, did a significant national survey. So I'm sure some of the information that we're sharing will be updated, and this will be unveiled in a month from tomorrow, April 21st. And there are sections there on prevention as well as intervention. And then the part of Latino community experience is actually the focus groups, is the results of the focus groups that we conducted for this project. And the idea, especially if some of you are starting from not a lot of work on this subject, the idea of doing listening sessions, focus groups, going to the community and asking questions, I think it's very important to start with that at any given point, and you can get a wealth of information. Any questions about this section, or any comments? I mean, Pierre and Robert, anytime you can step in. Okay, then let's move to the how part of things. And basically, what we decide to do in the how is have a story, rather than since the why was kind of heavy on the on the research part of things. On the how, we decided to have a story of a guy, and I forget the name right now, but we are using this picture model. And it's a story of a guy who has to grapple with these issues within his family. He's not abusive himself, but a relative is abusive and has to figure out how to deal with those things. So it's kind of a little bit of a case study, a composite of different situations. And as part of that, and this could be an interesting kind of teaching tool when folks are working with cross-culturally with people outside the Latino community, because these questions of what is different about us, and we are not trying to stereotype in any way, shape, or form, because we don't think that stereotypes are useful. However, generalizations can be useful. The difference between a generalization and stereotype, of course, is that stereotype is an absolute, right? Like all Latinos, family is essential for all Latinos. That would be a stereotype. But family is central for many Latino families. That's a generalization that I believe is valid and important. So Freddie, thank you. Thank you, Robert. The name of the guy is Freddie from West St. Paul, Minnesota. And some of the things that we emphasize are the issue of familismo, again, the importance of the family. And I have to say that, not surprisingly, in this survey of 800 people that we did across the U.S., one of the things that came up very strongly is that people are looking at family and community as a way to solve this problem rather than going immediately to systems, right? Like either the criminal justice system or any other system, the child protection, and so on. So collectivismo, which is part of doing the things in community and sometimes putting the community interest in front of the personal community. The issue of personalismo and confianza, that many Latinos like to develop a relationship before we trust someone, basically. Respect, respeto, of course, very, very important. The centrality of religiosity and spirituality, too, in our communities. And some of these things are, of course, not exclusive to Latino communities, but this is what we're talking about. And again, gender norms and the fluidity of gender norms. Again, sometimes what I feel that when we talk only about machismo and in the literature, some people have even a term called Marianismo to talk about kind of the equivalent in women, although most people in the community wouldn't recognize that word as an academic word. Sometimes those seem like frozen gender roles that have not been given the opportunity to change, And, gender roles change, like any role, like any social norm. I mentioned before that I just came back from a trip in Bolivia, which is a country that really has not had a lot of conversations around this issue, especially from the masculinity point of view, the healthy masculinity. And I have to say that when I talk to young people, a lot of them were like, machismo, that's something of the past. I mean, it's not a patriarchal society. It is still a patriarchal society as is ours. But it's interesting to see that young people don't necessarily connect with this idea of machismo. And when you talk about gender norms, then you give more flexibility about what that really means, right? And also the fact that these gender norms are always changing. So that's the how part of the Toolkit. Again, any questions, or Robert, Pierre, anything you want to add to this? Okay. Anytime you can join the conversation, So the next section of the toolkit is about tools and materials. So these are the practical materials. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that this campaign is to invite men to do something, and if you're going to use it, you have to figure out what you are going to invite them to do, right? I mean, even this general things, I invite you to participate and say no to violence. Well, what does that mean, So in some way, before you can use the Invito PSAs and posters, you have to figure out what to do. How are you going to bring people together? Like Robert has a particular model of how he has brought people together, and there's other models. And this is a little bit what the tools and materials are, different possibilities of how to organize men based on mainly on the work of other people, as well as the actual Invito campaign. Now we have another question. Go over respeto one more time. So thank you, Ren, for that. So I think a lot of people who have worked with Latino men have realized that the value of respect or respeto it's very important, and it can manifest in different ways. Certainly, there is the idea of respect for the elders, for people that are older than you. Although again, these things change according to where we are in the times and so on. And there's the negative part of respect that could be like, well, I'm the man, so I need to be respected, but there's no equivalence of respecting the partner. However, and this is actually that I learned pretty fast myself on when I did groups with men who use violence, and I did that for 10 years with Latinos and non-Latinos, that I often would do with men some kind of value clarification exercise. Why? Because it's so much easier to work within the values of self-defined values that people have. I think one of the risks about all of this is coming from a place where saying, okay, this is the value that I want you to go to. And especially one is working cross-culturally, and the truth is that one is working cross-culturally almost all the time, because I might be Latino, but I'm a different kind of Latino that Robert is and that Pierre is and that, a Puerto Rican man might be. So that's cross-cultural work. So a lot of what I did when working with men was asking them what are the essential values in their lives. And this was both with men who use violence and men who don't. So, for instance, I would make a little exercise that I would tell them, I don't know how many of you have teenagers or children at all, but if you do, or if you will, or if you have had one, if there was like a magic process, there isn't, but if there were a magic process in which you could pass a key value to your children, to your teenagers about, say, a relationship, what would that be? If you had this opportunity to talk to your son or your daughter and said, son, daughter, this is the most important thing, the most important value about relationships that I have, and people would come with things like respect. That came up a lot. Love came up a lot. Equality, equity, that didn't come up a lot. That's not to say that that's not where we want to go. But once the men share those values themselves, then I could work with them from that perspective. When it was working with men who use violence, I used that to hold them accountable, as well as to create connection with them. So when they came back and they have had an incident of, say, verbal abuse or something like that, I would say, well, how does that connect with this value that you told me what's so important for you, which is respect, But also with men who don't use violence, it's like, great. So what does that mean? What does respect mean to you? What does it look like in terms of behavior and so on? So I hope that answers your question. This is something that I included there because it comes up a lot. Do you operate from a specific definition of respect? They articulate their own definition. That's exactly where I was going. That in and on itself can be a wonderful exercise. Say, okay, what does this look like? What does respect look like in a relationship, right? Okay, you're very welcome. Thanks for the question. So again, any other questions? And if you prefer to use the chat function, it's perfectly fine. As you can see, it's a very easy way to communicate too. So going into the tools and materials, of course, the Invito materials are there, and you can download them from there. So we already talked about that, so I don't necessarily want to talk more about that. But other of the things that we have there is we have a resource that was produced some years ago by Casa Esperanza. It's an audio, a CD called Vive Feliz Hoy. It's only in Spanish. It doesn't have an English version. And it's basically another tool to engage men. It's almost like this guy is a psychologist. It's almost like a top psychologist on the radio, talking about different aspects of healthy masculinity, if you will. And some people have used it very effectively. It can be cut into different pieces to initiate a discussion, and you can get it from Casa. And Pierre, maybe you can put in there the link. I think you can order it for $5 or so, and it's a good resource. Then we, thank you, Pierre. We have then the work of very kind of carefully curated work from other organizations, and our criteria for what we included was number one, that it was not just a straight translation from a mainstream resource to a Latino resource, but it would be either a well-done cultural translation or something that was developed originally for Latino populations, either in the U.S. or in Latin America. And it's perfect that this one, Hombres Unidos, is the first one because Robert was involved with this project. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Robert, to describe.
Yes, thank you, Juan Carlos. So Hombres Unidos contra la Violencia Familiar is a curriculum that was created by Migrant Clinicians Network, and what it entails is that it allows for a facilitator to recruit men. It was specifically made for outreach to migrant men out on the fields when they were working. So it was a way for a facilitator to recruit men, to engage them, to participate in a group session that was typically anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, depending on their availability. But it's really a 10-hour training broken up into 5 different sessions where they participate in different activities. But really, it's about having a discussion around gender roles, domestic violence, the different forms of violence that exist, and how, as men, we are able to prevent it. And that's really a great tool for popular education, right? And here, you're engaging men by having a conversation or a plática around what we can do as individuals in our community. And it really goes back to the type of methodology that was used by Casa, which is interesting because it asked the men, what can we do to end violence in our community? So it's really just using them as a way to carry on the conversation. The curriculum is really just a way to initiate the conversation, but at the end of the day, it's really the men really expressing how they can make a change in their community, and that is by being vocal and becoming active leaders in their community around this issue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Robert. It's a great resource. I highly recommend it. And a couple of things about it. As Robert said, it uses a similar methodology as we do, but also it brought some materials from Latin America, right, Robert, from Nicaragua and other places, which is,
yes.
For me, really, an important step because if we are going to work with Latino communities here, instead of looking at the mainstream, I mean, sometimes it's okay to look at the mainstream and see, well, it's a great idea. I think it is also a great idea to look at what's happening in Latin American countries. And I have to say that there are some countries, including Nicaragua, Mexico, Brazil, that have very interesting and very well-developed work on this area of masculinity. And the other one is that actually this has been evaluated and with very, very positive results. And I have to confess that, I think the first time I heard, 5 sessions, 10 hours, that seems like not a big dose, as we say, right? But actually, the results have been very, very positive. So I recommend it. I mean, it's geared to a very particular population, obviously, migrant workers, but I think it can be adapted, and I think lessons can be learned from this particular research. Thank you, Robert. Another interesting project is this one, Historias de Hombres, or Men's Story Project, that was initiated by a Chilean-American woman, Dr. Josie Lehrer, out in California. And Josie doesn't like it if I call it a performance, because she says it's not a performance, but it is in the format. The final product is in the format of a piece that is presented as a theater piece. Those men that you look there are at the end of having presented this. But it is much more than that. It is a methodology that she does through workshops in which she brings a group of men together from a certain community, and she has done it both with Anglos and Latino men in the U.S. and in Latin America too. She brings together kind of monitor men, in some way, men that have some level of consciousness about this issue. And she helps them develop their personal story around masculinity in a format that could be performed. Doesn't mean that they will perform it, and many of them choose not to, but they work storyline in first person about how they grew up as men, what choices that made, what they learned about that. And then at the end, she, together with the group, they choose a number of stories. And this is not only about violence. It has, they cover a lot of topics, including LGBTQ issues, addiction issues, and so on, victimization of children issues. And they perform it, and they present it, and it's very, very powerful. So the methodology is really beautiful. She has made a couple of videos of these presentations, both in English and Spanish, and you can look at Men's Story Project. There are links in our website to all the authors of this methodology, but this is a very powerful one. And if you're not familiar with it, I would invite you at the very least to look at the videos, because they're, I don't think you can see them without shedding some tears for sure. That's certainly from my point of view. What is the link? So, Pierre, can you help me out with the link for the Men's Story Project? I think it's menstoryproject.org, but as I continue talking, Pierre will put it up there. Then there's the National Compadres Network, which is interesting because it's not, again, it's an approach, it's a methodology. It's not so much a curriculum or a program. And, I know, Robert, you have been exposed many times to the great wisdom of these men, including the maestros, right? Jerry Tay and Ricardo Carrillo started it many, many years ago in California. And it's a place where they create, the National Compadres Network, they create circles of men. We were talking before about men not having spaces to be real with each other. Well, these folks create those circles with the concept of compadres. And for those of you who are not Latino, the concept of compadres is a very strong concept in Latino cultures. And a compadre is that, say that I'm the godfather of, say, Robert children, I don't think Robert has children, but if I become the godfather of Robert's children, I would be his compadre. So it's through being invited into the family, and of course, padre or madre. There's comadre too, it means father or mother, but compadre is like co-father or co-mother, which is a beautiful concept in some way, right? And actually, in Latin America, and I think here to a certain degree too, a godparent is someone that has the responsibility of, if something happens to the parents, to take care of the children, right? So it's not something very light, if you will. But the relationship between these co-parents, compadres, is very, very significant in Latin America. And, as with everything else, it could be negative and it could be positive, So these folks in California and Texas have taken this concept of compadres, of we have this special relationship and then this special responsibility and accountability with each other. And we are going to support each other to be the best men that we can be. It's very beautiful. It's not only about violence. It includes any kind of topic, including, not only partnership violence, but also violence in the community, and also, dealing with drugs and alcohol and so on. And the other thing that is important and kind of unique about this approach is that, it's very culturally based, and I have to say, very cultural based from a Chicano point of view, which is, very particular kind of cultural approach, right? And also, it has a strong spiritual base, which is something that is often lacking in this intervention. And what I mean by that is not necessarily a religious base, but a broader kind of spiritual base. And as it was explained to me by the founders, one of the key concepts that they use is that, say, they have a men's circle, and they have different men's circles in different parts of California and the Southwest. And if a man comes to the circle with having done something wrong, and it could be violence, it could be alcohol or drugs, so i.e. violence to oneself, right? Any kind of carga, as they call it, like heavy thing, and comes for support there. The approach is like, basically, the rest of the men say, you are our compadre, you're our brother, and we are not going to let you do this. We're not going to let you hurt yourself. We're not going to let you hurt anyone else, because when you hurt anyone, including yourself, you're hurting others, because we're all one, basically. We're all connected, And they take it very seriously, that approach. So it's really, in some ways, such a different approach from any other kind of intervention that you can see out there, especially around violence. So again, if you're interested, I invite you to visit them with the National Compadres Network. I don't know, Robert, if you have anything to say about, since you have been, also exposed to the teaching. Those are my.
The only thing that I would like to add regarding the work that has been done through the National Compadres Network is that although it's spiritual, a lot of the conversation revolves around healing. So that's also very important in prevention work. I feel that before we can even start talking about prevention, we need to start talking about healing. And I say that because a lot of the boys that I've worked with, like myself, have, at one point were, we were in a situation where we witnessed domestic violence in our own household. So a lot of the conversations that I've had with men and boys in my community and throughout presentations is that, they still they've never talked to anyone about the violence that they witnessed in their homes growing up, or even
yeah.
I think that
we lost you a little bit, Robert.
Yeah, sorry. Some of the work that they do provides an opportunity to have that discussion also.
Right. and Ren is asking if it's discussion-based, and absolutely, right? There's not a set curriculum. And he was asking, or she, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. You got the question. How? I mean, exactly what Robert was saying about the uncertain areas. They just go into anything from the same perspective. Something that I remember Jerry Haya saying that it impacted me, and I'm sure you have heard it, Robert, is that when especially they work a lot with young people, and some of them are gang involved and that kind of thing, that when they come to a teenager that is so broken, right? Instead of coming from a punishment kind of view, they come. The first question they answer is what happened to you, not what did you do or what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. So very powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff. And again, I might not do it full justice because I'm not as involved. I've seen Jerry and Ricardo present many times, but I'm not part of that particular group. Then we have a couple of, a resource that comes actually originally from Brazil. This you here are Brazilian. It's called Program H. It's started to be implemented in the U.S. It has been translated to Spanish and English from Portuguese, and it is a manual to follow to work with young men, and not only about issues of violence, but also HIV, and sometimes in Latin America the conversation is a little broader, and they call it masculinity. That's common there. And it not only includes gender-based violence, but it includes other aspects of what could be a toxic or a positive masculinity. There's another comment from Ren, and that was what I was wondering. I know from experience, if you've been in the cycle for a long time, your perspective is cute a bit, yeah. And I just wonder how others are approaching that conversation. Yeah, exactly right. Sometimes you have to be shaken to get out of the cycle, right? Yeah. And the last resource I have in this PowerPoint, and I realized, Pierre, that I haven't updated this to include one more resource, Mujer. But the last one I have here is Coaching Boys into Men, which is one of those cases that it was a program developed by a mainstream organization, Futures Without Violence. I have to make the disclosure that I worked for 10 years with them, and I was part of this initiative. And I think it's a great framework to work with, and it's basically engaging men to do something for children. It's a little bit like coming through a back door. Sometimes, as someone had mentioned before, I think it was Sonia, you very directly say, well, I invite men to talk about violence and the cycle of violence and all of that. You won't get any men to come to talk about that. If you start talking about healthy relationships and that kind of thing, sure, that might work better, or how to be a better father. That's a big way to engage men. And Coaching Boys into Men is actually, even though it's geared towards coaches in high schools and college, in my opinion, it's a bigger framework of inviting men to do something for children or boys in their life, whether it's their own children or their students or their coachees or whatever you call it, or and it's once the men come, and I'm telling you, when I started doing this work with them, for the first time I had men in numbers coming to this training. And once they are there, then you introduce concepts of role modeling and how children learn from you and so on. And it can become a very powerful self-reflective kind of tool, if you will. So we are in the middle, actually, of adapting Coaching Boys into Men in collaboration with Futures Without Violence to Spanish and adapting to the Latino community. So stay tuned. We're hoping that sometime in the summer we will have something to share with you for that, and that's very exciting. And there's one more resource, and this is an example of the toolkit that continues to grow and change when we find new resources. Pierre, maybe you can say a little bit about Mujer in Canada and the work that they are doing.
Sorry, Juan Carlos, hold on. I had to unmute myself and take myself off speakerphone. Yes, Mujer is an organization in Canada that stumbled upon our work, I believe, also on social media, and they said, "Oh, we have a similar kind of a similar project or initiative as Invito," and so they share the work with us. It's also an educational campaign that very much took the same framework that the Invito did in terms of inviting the community to make PSAs and materials, and so that's basically what Mujer is doing. It's just providing PSAs on for example, one of them is How to Be a Man. Is one of the 50-second PSA, and it's about a man who is checking out women at a bar, and then the other men stand up, and kind of a bystander intervention kind of thing. So it's an interesting framework they're interesting videos that take about 1 minute and make a very good point. There's another one called Hasta Aquí No Más, or the idea of challenging friends. This is it kind of thing, and also bystander intervention. So you can check out their work also on our website, and then there is a link that we provide for Mujer as well there.
Yeah, and I put the link there. It's mujer.ca of Canada. It's not or.com. And yeah, they have some really good videos in Spanish for bystander intervention, which really there's not a lot out there, as you probably know. Thank you.
Juan Carlos, I'll also say that these things like the videos or pamphlets, and I believe you've mentioned this already, they're great for groups and starting a conversation, kickstarting a conversation. So even if you find videos that are not compellingly made on YouTube, for example, I have found those videos to be very, very effective in men responding and engaging with those videos, because sometimes they say, well, no, we don't do that, or that is unrealistic, and people engage very, very well. So Mujer's videos are excellent. The Invito's videos, I think, are excellent, and that's a little bias on my part. And men you will find also engage in having conversations, productive and critical conversations about these videos.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's actually like both Pierre and Robert said. All of these are tools to start the conversation, and the tools are the tools. You have a tool set but if you're not a good carpenter, you won't build something good with the tools. So you have to, of course, the facilitation is the other part of the work. Okay, so we have a few more 4 minutes. So the other part that I want to share that I mentioned is the what to do part. And what I want to emphasize here, we won't have a time to go deeply into all of these things, is that there are a series of almost like challenges for men of like, in order to do this work, these are some of the key elements. And each section, like self-reflect, there's a series of questions, and there are some videos too that show some exercises that I have found very effective, like the Act Like a Man box, but a Spanish version called Yo Soy Muy Macho, or the Pyramid of Machismo and Patriarchy, which is a great tool to involve men who, as Robert was saying, men who say, well, I'm not violent, I'm not part of the problem, but there's ways to illustrate to men that in some way we're not part of the solution, we are part of the problem, right? Or why there's a connection between making sexist jokes and comments and catcalls, piropos, and more extreme violence against women. So all of that is in there. So in some way, there are tools too. There's someone actually locally right now in St. Paul and Minneapolis that is developing a curriculum for men based on some of the questions that we put there. So quickly in the last 5 minutes, I'll just go through the sections, but again, I won't be able to go deeply, but helps self-reflect, I think, is an essential part of what men have to do. Being an ally to women and girls, and we emphasize what is the quality of an ally. What does that really mean? You can see the graphic there of the geese. For me, it's an apt one because being an ally for me means sometimes being in the back of the room, and sometimes being in the front of the room, and sometimes being side to side with women, and sometimes being behind, and sometimes being in front of following the the lead of women really who are the leaders in this movement. Influencing other men, being a leader. This is a photograph of a great leader in this movement and a good friend of Robert and I, Emiliano Diaz de Leon, down there in Texas. So, since this patriarchal society is still a privilege of us as men, we can use that privilege to fight the privilege, to be a leader against that patriarchal structure. Being a positive bystander, Pierre just mentioned that resource from Mujer, but there's others. So what does that mean to be a bystander? Or some people are using the word upstander. How can we intervene? Just an example of a campaign that was done by a very, very small organization in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Actually, one of his friends said to their cousin that he's being abusive and he needs help. Men can't. Because that's the name of the campaign. Disclosing our own story, we know that millions and millions of men are survivors of childhood abuse, childhood rape, childhood physical violence, exposure to domestic violence, right? Many men are in that place, and I think telling our stories is got to be to Rivas, who's a well-known actor that has been going around and talking about this issue. So that's another example. The socialization of men, how they teach us to be men, as I mentioned before, does not include, being vulnerable and being exposed and, that kind of thing, of course. So it is a hard thing for us to do, but I think it's a very important one because as more and more come forward and say, yes, this happened to me too, and I am a victim of this crazy ideology of male, power control and superiority, then more people will be able to come forward. And then, like with the case of coaching voices to men, becoming role models for boys, that can be a very, very strong motivation for many men. And last but not least is supporting women's and girls' organizations, certainly. And, most of you work in such organizations, and sometimes men can use their financial and physical abilities to help organizations. So, and then the last section we already talked about, sharing your work. And we do invite you, Invito, to, if you have ideas, if you have feedback, and so on, to share it with us. So I will end there. It's here put there. Sarah will be sending the PowerPoint, and everything that I presented is in the toolkit. So you can go into the toolkit and explore it, and there's a lot to learn. There's our email addresses there for follow-up, and you're very welcome, Sonia. Pierre, Robert, last words. Anything else you would like to add?
No, Carlos, I think this was a great presentation. Thank you very much. And again, everyone, there is your information. If you have any questions or we can be of some sort of assistance in helping you giving you direction on customizing the tools or using them, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Robert? We cannot hear you.
Oh, I want to echo what Pierre said and mentioned. We are here to help. The tools and the resources made available to you through the presentation are going to be valuable to your organization. Feel free to email us, and please like us on Facebook. I've shared the link, and again, we're here to help. So reach out to us at any time. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Sarah, for running the webinar for us, and have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.